All right, you've got a choice to make. You said you were going to go for a run, and all of a sudden it is 7 a.m. You said this is when you're going to go for this run, but you're really comfortable in bed and you can't bother getting up. What are you going to do? This is a real point of choices, what we might refer to very, very straightforwardly as a choice point. Well, what we can do is with a point like this, we can go into one of two directions. We can go in one direction, the idea of short-term fulfillment, short-term comfort. I'm just going to stay in bed. I'll go for a run another time. It's absolutely fine. There's plenty more days to do it. Fine. That's one approach. The exact same, we can go down the other approach, which is going to be towards longer term fulfillment. I know I'm really comfortable, but in the long run, even though this run is going to be uncomfortable, it's going to make me a little bit fitter, and that's who I want to become in the future. That same point here, we've got a choice. We can either choose short-term comfort, we can choose long-term fulfillment. What are we going to do in terms of either of these points? That's what the point of this video is all about. And to be able to understand a point like that, what we need to do is we need to understand acceptance and commitment therapy. So I'm recommending ACT Made Simple for a very, very nice introduction to this idea. Because what we're saying here is, what we're doing is we've got a choice. So between those two different ideas, and even though we want to do this approach, let's say in the perfect world, we're going to be mature, we're going to be responsible, we're going to go for that run, there is that temptation to get hooked away. That's what the terminology of ACT is going to say. From that choice point, we know what our values are, we know what we want to move towards, but we might get hooked away. So what are we going to do about all of this? Well, that's exactly what ACT is all about. How do we actually manage that process overall? They've got this absolutely lovely word, by the way, called the Hexaflex, which is this. Hopefully this will show up. It's quite a tricky diagram. If you want to be able to just maybe pause the video or screenshot that if you're on your phone, that's what we're talking about here. And I want to talk about one particular area within this as well, which is known as defusion, because the whole point of ACT is to promote psychological flexibility. Rather than just having a simple choice and just doing it over and over and over again and like a machine and being overly ordered, what we want to do is to be able to introduce this element of choice, this understanding of how is it that we make decisions to begin with. And when we think about defusion specifically, that's what I'm going to focus in on. Out of all of those areas that we could particularly pick, I want to focus on defusion, not diffusion, by the way. Defusion, D-E-F-U-S-I-O-N. It's this idea that we might become so closely linked and related to one particular point that we start to judge it unnecessarily straight away. So if, let's say, using the same example of physical fitness, it could be, I'm going to go for a run, but as soon as that word "but" starts to come in, that's where fusion is starting to come in. I want to go for a run, but I know I'm not going to be able to stick to it anyway in the long run, so there's probably not much point in doing this. Okay, I'm going to go for a run, but I'm already overweight. It's going to be really physically painful. I don't think I should do it. Okay, I'm going to go for a run, but what happens if all my friends start to judge me as a result of this? I can't deal with that. I can't deal with it at all. I'm just going to scrap away. I'm going to choose short-term comfort. I want to go for a run. I'm not going to keep going on about this. I want to go for a run, but what might the people on the street think of me as I'm doing this, as they see that I'm really out of breath after running just 100 meters? All that's happened in all those situations there is you've had a thought, you've made a decision, and all the prejudged evaluations of the outcomes of that choice have already started to layer on top. So if you imagine from here, we've got this fusing with us. This judgment, we've got this action, we've got this judgment, and it's layering in on top. So all of a sudden, what we need to do is we need to think of how do we reverse that process. So it's, I want to go for a run, but I'm already overweight and people are going to laugh at me and I can't do it. What we've done there is we've just justified completely unfairly why you shouldn't move towards your desired future, why you shouldn't move towards fulfillment of your values. What we need to do is need to unhook from this and start to see that this is a genuine possibility, that people might laugh at us, that we might have lower self-esteem to begin with, but that on its own doesn't mean that we shouldn't do this action. It's relevant. We have to take that into account. This is a real criticism. We're not shying away from that. But it's not a reason in and of itself to not do this. A valid reason, for example, would be instead of, you said you're going to go for a run, but you've genuinely broken your leg and you're in hospital. In that case that's no longer fusion. That's like a genuine explanation as to why you shouldn't go for a run. Whereas just because you think other people might judge you, it's that where it says might, it's that extra element of things might happen or they might not happen or they should or they shouldn't. It's that layering that we need to be aware of. And as soon as we can detach from that, as soon as we can defuse from that, we end up back at that original point, how I started the video, that choice point. It's understanding that when I think about short-term comfort versus long-term fulfillment, I can realize what it is that's going to, let's say I decide to take this action, it's understanding what is going to hook me away from it towards short-term satisfaction. And if I keep picking that choice over all of them, I know that essentially what I'm doing is just falling to my lowest level. I know that I'm just going to resort to coping mechanisms. I'm going to be avoiding life overall rather than actually trying to experience life. Whether it's easy or difficult, that's what this is about. It's about actually experiencing life rather than experiential avoidance, which would be on the other side. So when I talk about that, that is literally just a brief explanation as to one of those points on psychological flexibility. So again, just to make it nice and clear, I'm going to poke just at the side as I talk about this. That's just one of those ideas when we start to try to understand this. And psychological flexibility comes in when we try to take into account much wider what's going on. Like, how is it that we're able to be in contact with the present moment? How is it that we understand our values and what it is that we're trying to move towards? Can we actually accept that as well? Can we actually accept some of the limitations, especially as we start to get hooked away, so that we can actually make that commitment to ourselves and to our future self? Going all the way back to the start of these videos, I mentioned that you've got you as a person, but you're also connected to your past and you're also connected towards your future. You're also connected to who you could be at your best moments and who you are at your worst moments. It's understanding that you are this community of individuals. They're all you, but they're all different elements of you to be able to bring back into the archetypal psychology, for example, when we looked at awakening the heroes within. It's understanding this continuity. You are your past, but you are also your future. So if you're in the middle now, what can you learn about those two things? You are also you at your highest highs and your lowest lows. You're not just you up here and scrapping this part away down here. That is also you. We've got to learn how to accept that. So with all of this, how do we meet that in the middle? Hopefully you can start to see my sort of very 3D outlay way of actually like managing this on a 2D screen. But we need to try to take into account all of those approaches overall, realizing that we are dynamically at the center of that approach. And once we realize that, then we can take, as I've said multiple times in these videos, a decisive stand towards existence. We can take into account who we want to be and have that pulling, that future pulling ourselves towards a certain direction. We can see ourselves in the past, realizing who it is that we once were and who wanted to become. We can start to realize it on that approach as well, the heights and the depths of who we are. And it all pulls us together into the present moment, not necessarily in an overly spiritual way. I'm not talking here even necessarily about mindfulness or anything to do with religion or spirituality. It's just the realization that at any given point, you are at that choice point. So when I was saying before, past and present, as well as like high and low, it comes back full circle to what I was saying at the start of this video. The choice. We've got short-term commitment, short-term comfort versus long-term fulfillment. That point, that choice point, lies exactly in between that diagram. That's where you find yourself at all times when you're making a decision. So we need to try to understand how can we be as psychologically flexible as possible to put ourselves in the best situation to help make that decision. Hopefully that makes sense in terms of how I'm trying to describe this, because really this book is wonderful. It goes through so many practical suggestions and exercises and meditations and analogies. ACT, by the way, love analogies. So there's tons and tons of metaphors in here. But the idea with all of this is it's made simple. It's in the title. It's a practical guide to understanding who you are, how to deal with difficulty, and how you're able to move towards that desired future overall, which is also going to be the final book in this series as well, about what are the rules from a psychological basis, about what makes a healthy human in its ideal form. So again, to keep it all nice and straightforward, this is a lovely little primer, so practical. Act Made Simple by Russ Harris is the book recommendation for this. And we're going to move on to the very final book in the series just on the next video. Again, let me see you over there.